problem. Okay, so the picture what you see on your screen is a portrait of the fall of Jerusalem. So as you know, somewhere in AD 69, Nero died. So he was reigning from somewhere around AD 54. And after his death, Vespasian became the emperor of Rome. He ruled from 69 AD to 79 AD, somewhere around 10 to 11 years. But even during the time of Nero, somewhere around AD 66, Jews, they started rebelling against Jerusalem. I mean, the Roman rule in Jerusalem. So it was just like a kind of Jewish-Roman war. When Vespasian came into power in 70 AD, he decided to stop this Jewish rebellion. So one of his generals, Titus, was assigned to this task. And what he did is he came to Jerusalem, okay, and he surrounded the city. But these people were not stopping their rebellion. So they slowly started cutting off food and water supplies. It went for many months, but these people were not willing to, not willing to subdue. So finally, after waiting for about 4 months, they decided to rush into the city and attack and destroy it. So this picture is just showing, this particular incident. The Romans, they rebuilt Jerusalem, and they even renamed it. And they also built a temple, Jupiter, in the same site where this Jewish temple was located. Vespasian was, of course, a good ruler. He knew how to manage things well. And, why he decided to stop this Jewish rebellion was to, to bring that control over this entire locality. And he wanted to, all kinds of rebellion against his authority. The same Titus, who was the military general, who did this, operation in Jerusalem, became the successor of Vespasian somewhere around AD 79. So 71, for about 2 years, Titus was emperor for Rome. After Titus, Domitian came into power in AD 81. And from 81 to 96, Domitian was the emperor of Rome. So I was just giving you a brief ground. What were the things going on, in the Middle East, I mean, in Israel, the nearby areas during those days. Last week, we were talking about the first century Christianity, how Christianity started, flourishing from Jerusalem and slowly moving towards Antioch, from there to Ephesus, and to Europe, okay, and to the entire Roman world. Christianity slowly grew. That is what we discussed in our last week. So today, we are going to talk about the 2nd century, starting from 100 AD to 200. So we are going to talk about 3 challenges or threats church had to face during this time. And as a result of that, there were people to defend Christianity. They were called the apologists. So we're going to see about some of the apologists. And we will also, if time permits, we will talk about apostolic fathers. Okay, so let me start with the 3 threats. The first threat was the political threat that was coming from Rome. And second threat was a religious threat or a religious influence, you can say, from Judaism, a Jewish threat, a religious threat. The third kind of threat was a philosophical threat. It was coming from the pagan world. Okay. So these are the 3 threats or challenges early Christians faced. So let me start with the political threat. Okay. So as you know, many emperors, starting from maybe last we were talking about Nero, right? From the time of Nero, many emperors came and gone. Many of them, but not all of them were against Christianity. Christianity faced major challenges from maybe about 10 emperors, and most of the dangers or most of the um, most of the persecutions they suffered from 4 key emperors. Nero, we were talking about him, last week. Then Domitian. Domitian's period was almost peaceful, but nearing to the end of his reign, Domitian also against Christians, and a lot of persecution happened. For example, John, he was exiled during the time of Domitian that we discussed last time. Then Trajan and Marcus Aurelius, then Septimus, Maximinus, Decius, Valerian, and Diocletian. All these emperors, they were against Christians, but most of the damage, most of the persecution happened during the time of Nero and these 3 other emperors. It is easy to remember Domitian, Decius, and Diocletian. 3 Ds. So that way you can remember their names. Domitian, Decius, Diocletian. So let me give you some picture about what kind of persecutions were going on against Christians. Some of the records we have, especially coming from some of the Roman historians. Let me quote one of the historians for you. This is Tacitus. Tacitus was a Roman historian. He was a senator, and he recorded history somewhere between 14 AD to 68 AD. This particular thought is during the time of Nero. Last time you remember we were about Christians. They were in Rome, and he started some persecutions. So regarding this particular incident, there is a quotation coming from Tacitus, a mention from Tacitus in his writings called the Annals. He says, quote, a vast multitude of Christians, they were convicted not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred against mankind. And in their deaths, they were made the subjects of scorn, for they were wrapped in the hides of wild beasts and torn by dogs, or nailed to crosses, or set on fire. And when day declined, they were burning to serve for nighttime lights. So you will get a picture of the kind of persecution or kind of torture these Christians had to face. This is during the time of maybe somewhere around the 64, 65 AD. You can just remember, Paul was first arrested, and later he was released. Then he was again arrested, and during that time, Paul was pretty sure that it is going to be very tough, and he is not going to come out from the prison. And as he expected, he was beheaded. Okay. And Peter, for example, Peter was crucified upside down. Last time we were talking about that also happened during this time period, during the time of Nero. And many other Christians had to suffer and lay down their lives for the sake of their faith. Now, this is a piece of information, a history coming from the writings of Tacitus. During the time of Trajan, somewhere around 115 AD, there was a magistrate in the Roman Empire. His name was Pliny the Younger. He is also considered a historian. Why? Because he wrote so many letters, hundreds of letters. And from many of the letters he wrote, we have a collection of 207 letters, survived letters. Okay. These letters are carrying a great historical value to get a clear picture of what was going on in that period of time. So here, Pliny the Younger, he is writing a letter somewhere around maybe 110, 115 AD. He is writing to Trajan. Okay. As I said, he is a magistrate. He is a person in authority. He is writing a letter asking the Emperor Trajan for clarifying some of his doubts concerning these Christians who are arrested. How to deal with these guys? He has some doubts, and he just wanted to clarify some of his doubts. So he writes. Let me quote. It is customary for me, sir, to refer to you in all matters wherein I have a doubt. Who truly is better able to rule my hesitancy or to instruct my ignorance? I was never present at examinations of Christians, therefore I do not know what is customarily punished, nor to what extent, nor how far to take the investigation. I was quite undecided. Should there be any consideration given to age? Are those who are, however delicate, no different from the stronger? Should penitents obtain pardon? Or, as has been the case, particularly with Christians, to desist makes no difference? Should the name itself be punished, even if crimes are absent, or the claims that go with the names? So here he is asking some genuine questions to his emperor Trajan, and it also shows that good access to Trajan. To the emperor, he was directly able to write letters and get answers. He's telling, I do not know much of the details how to handle these Christians, okay, because and I need to examine these people. I don't know how they are treated, what kind of punishment we need to give to them, how far we need to extend the punishment, or how much level of investigation we need to do. I'm not sure. He's telling. And he's asking whether we need to give some consideration for age. For example, some old guy is coming, he's a Christian. And before giving some punishment, should I consider his age or not? He's asking. Who is very weak. So should the punishment be of the same level, or we need to give some consideration to a weaker person? Or if somebody is pleading for mercy, he's saying he's ready to denounce his faith for instance, should we give some punishment? Or just because somebody is a Christian, we need to punish, or if some crime is also associated with him, we need to punish. So he has many questions. And he is continuing his letter. He says, meanwhile, this is the method I have followed with those who were brought before me as Christians. I asked them directly if they were Christians. The ones who answered affirmatively, I questioned again with a warning, and at a third time, those who persisted, I ordered led away. For I have no doubt whatever else they confess to, certainly this pertinency and inflexible obstinacy ought to be punished. So what he is telling is, if somebody is coming arrested, he will question them multiple times. If somebody is very much resistant, then he will punish them because they are not inflexible or not ready to submit to his authority. So that takes as a reason, and he punished them. He continues. It's very interesting to his letter. Although I believed it necessary to find out what was the truth from two servant maids, which were called deaconesses by means of torture. Nothing more to find than a disgusting fanatical superstition. Therefore, I stopped the examination and hastened to consult them. For it appears to me a proper matter for counsel, most greatly on account of the number of people endangered. For many, all of ages, all classes, and both sexes already are brought into danger or shall be in the future. And not only the cities, the condition the contagion of this superstition is spread throughout the villages and countryside, but it appears to me possible to stop it and put it right. So he's telling people are coming from various backgrounds, old and young, and people from different classes in society, rich and poor, and educated and uneducated, male and female, and all kinds of people are getting attracted to this dangerous kind of fanatical religion, a superstitious religion, and it is spreading rapidly. So somehow we need to take some measures to stop this foolishness. That is what is writing to, Emperor Trajan. So this gives us a kind of picture how the Roman world viewed the early Christians. This was a kind of image Roman government officials had. But they were so much persistent, they were not much willing to deny their faith. Very rarely somebody was willing to denounce their faith, and it was a great challenge for the Roman officials to investigate all these people and to, condemn, to decide how to deal with these people. So it was a big concern and difficulty for them. So this is a good piece of information we have. So the first threat I was talking about, the early church faced was the political threat that is coming from Rome. But Christians were persistent. It was, the model of the example of the apostles. Early Christians also preferred to suffer for their. First Peter chapter 4, verse 16. If you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. They followed it. They were willing to be burned as night lamps. For example, in this picture you can see, I think this picture is showing, I'm not sure, maybe Polycarp's death, maybe, I don't know what it is showing. So what you see here is Colosseum, the Roman Colosseum. Colosseum was made as an amphitheater. So in this, you can see, so many lamb kind of things you can see in this picture. They are Christians. So they tied Christians to stakes, and they set them on fire. So in the evening time, in the night time, these people were as a light, as a lamp. So many of them were crucified, many of them were beheaded, many of them were thrown to wild beasts, and many of them were tortured in various ways. So this gives you a picture. Let me also quote Tertullian. Tertullian was a 2nd century church father. He writes in his famous writing, The Apology, the oftener we are mown down by you, the more in number we grow. The blood of Christians is seed. He's writing to Emperor, he's appealing to Emperor, giving a defense to it. He says, the oftener we are mown down by you, the more in number we grow. The blood of Christians is seed. Another quote from Eusebius. Eusebius is from a well-known person. He is called the father of church history. He wrote great volumes on, the early church. He was a close friend of Constantine, and he had a lot of access to information. He wrote a great detailed, history on the early church. It's a great benefit for us to refer today. So regarding the political threat and the kind of persecutions, there is a quote from Eusebius. He says, we ourselves beheld, when we were at these places, many all at once in a single day, some of whom suffered beheading, others punishment by fire, so that the murderous axe was dulled and worn out, was broken in pieces, and executioners grew utterly weary. It was then that observed a most marvelous eagerness and a truly divine power and zeal in those who place their faith in Christ, in the Christ of God. As soon as sentence was given against the first, some from one quarter and others from another would leap up to the tribunal before the judge and confess themselves Christians. So Eusebius says, in some days there will be multitude of people, many number of people coming up saying that I am appealing before the tribunal, before the judge. They say that I am ready to die. And these people were killing them, beheading, and these executioners, they were getting tired because people are coming, and the axe which they used to cut the head of Christians, the axe got worn out. So they need to sharpen it again and again. That was the kind of situation. The eagerness, he says the divine power, the seal with which people came forward and confessed that they are Christians. One person is getting beheaded, and immediately the next person is coming up. So you can imagine, the kind of situation the early Christianity had to undergo. So I was trying to quote so many quotations just to give you a clear picture. I think a better idea you might have got from these quotations. These are all pieces of history two of the quotations are coming from not from Christian origin at all. They are coming from the side of uh, the government. And another one, of course, Eusebius. Eusebius's time was also very tough in the beginning stage when Constantine came, and he became a close friend of Constantine, and he was able to, maybe he was encouraged to record all these things. He did it, and it was well preserved. So we have all this information. So let me tell you some of the facts about the martyrdom in the early church. So at first, I would like to say that it was not, many times we'll think that, the entire 300 years were full of these kind of persecutions. But that is not the correct way of understanding history. That is not true. That's the reason I was showing you. There are many number of Roman emperors. Maybe, I do not know, from that list we were seeing many people. Right? So 10 of them were quite against Christianity. From that, if you see, 4 of them, Nero, Domitian, Decius, and Diocletian. So these 4 guys were very much against Christianity, and a lot of suffering happened during that period of. So it was like a periodic torture. In between, there will be a time of peace, and again another guy will come and he will start. He will be against Christians, and the persecution happens. And what do you think are the charges, against Christians? It was not that they believed in Jesus. That was not the main charge against them. They were charged charged with the 3 main charges. One was they were called atheists. That means, Christians, we do not worship any of the idols. Okay. But in the Roman world, when they see they can stand worshiping a god without an idol. And Christians are against all other gods. Okay, all other gods of this world, they are against them. And they do not have any idols or anything. So Romans considered Christians in general as atheists, one who do not believe in God. This is how they understood. So being an atheist was a big crime those days. That is one of the reasons why Christians were persecuted. That was a charge number 1. Second charge is coming from a misunderstanding. They called Christians are cannibals. What does that mean? Cannibals are people who eat other human beings, right? The flesh of other human beings. This idea is coming from a misunderstanding related to the Lord's table. In Lord's table, we generally talk about, partaking from the body and blood of Jesus Christ. So Romans, I do not know whether they really misunderstood it or they really made a charge against them falsely with an allegation that these people are practicing cannibalism. I do not know what exactly the thing, but this was one of the charge, and it is something related to a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation or a misinterpretation of the Lord's table. Third charge was incest. You will be surprised. Why should a Christian be charged, for incest? Incest is, I hope you understand what does that mean. I do not wish to explain that in detail. It is because Christian meetings were private meetings. Okay, Christian church meetings were private meetings. It is not a public meeting. They will assemble in a house or in a hall or in a room or in a secluded place. And Christians used to call each other brothers and sisters. In a Roman context, these Romans were not able to understand when 2 people or people comes together, they will do some some immoral things. Okay, this is their general idea. When people comes together in a Roman world, they usually in their parties and all of their meetings, this kind of, what we can say, this kind of misbehavior is very common. For this kind of, sexual relationship or sexuality, they, what we can say, it was part of their culture in all their meetings. So Christians were calling, brothers and sisters, and they come together in a private meeting for church meeting. It was interpreted as an incest, and that is a crime. So these three charges were against Christians. I mean, they used to charge against Christians. Many times it is not always the kind of, government is coming against Christians. Many times, the public was creating problem. The bitterness by public, that was the reason behind, some of these persecutions. That means some emperor, I told you, some of these people I listed, some of them were against Christians and they made some decrees against Christians. But in otherwise, in some of the cases, public will come and complain against Christians. And as a result of that, some of the governors or some of the people in authority, they have to involved in that matter. Christians were punished for that because of public bitterness. If you see in our country, religious persecution is happening, Christian persecution is happening. Many times it is happening not because there is a deliberate government policy against Christianity. In many states where there is no such restriction or any policy or anything against Christianity, I think in our country there is no such government policy exists, which is supporting the persecution for Christians. But many times what happens? Public, they get involved into the matter and they come together and they start attacking. And they will force some of the government bodies to involve in this, and these Christians will be arrested and some kind of torture happens. But sometimes silently some government may even support these kind of persecutions. A similar scenario we can see even in the Roman world. Another reason for the persecutions in the early century, that was related to some natural disaster. For example, I was talking about the fire incident during the time of Nero. So their interpretation is this fire happened because of some of the gods. Some of the gods are angry against the people of Rome, Christians. Christians are not worshipping these Roman deities. And because of that, those gods are getting angry. For example, there is a flood. They will say that, that particular God is angry against people. Why? Against the nation. Why? Against the land. The reason is because of Christians. Christians are not worshipping that deity. So that angry against the land, and it is causing a natural disaster. So if there is a plague or a flood or a fire, or if there is no rain, for instance, drought. So in all these cases, people had some reasons to blame Christians. They will say, some of our deities are angry with us or with our land because you Christians are not worshipping our deities. That was the reason why, these kind of torture was happening against Christianity. Romans had no problem with Jesus. Romans had problem because Christians worshipped only Jesus and they denied to worship other gods. So when these people were taken, arrested, And when they were, you know, the sentencing is going on, the magistrate will tell them, we will send you freely. You need to do only one thing. What you need to do? You need to say, the Caesar is the Lord. But Christians were not willing to do that. They will say Jesus is. And I don't remember where I read. One of the guys, I don't remember whether it is Pliny the Younger or someone else. He used to keep some, uh, for example, image of Caesar and some wine and some of these things, and he will ask Christians to offer to that idol. Uh, I mean, worship Caesar. And he used to maintain some of these things in his inventory, the things related to their worship, some wine and other things they pour, and I don't know how to worship. But they used to maintain these kind of things as in their inventory. And if somebody comes, he's a Christian, he is not willing to worship these Romans. So they will be asked, okay, you did. Denouncing Jesus is not mandatory, but thing is, they need to worship some of these deities. Or you worship Caesar. That is also acceptable. But Christians were not willing to do that. Okay. But slowly things started changing. People's mind started getting changed because of the Christian commitment. These people were willing to die for their faith, and they were doing it so joyfully. They were coming up and willing to die. And slowly the popular opinion about Christianity started changing in somewhere in the late 3rd century. As you continue to study, we will see even Emperor Constantine, his mother, before Constantine's conversion, his mother was following Christianity, for example. It has even reached to the palace. So that is how Christianity, flourished in the 1st century. And the key thing is people were willing to die for their faith. So it's a challenge for us today. But today we realize in our nation or in our neighboring nations, in many places, still there is persecution going on. A similar kind of persecution. Some persecutions are sponsored by the state, and some are coming from the bitterness of people. People create trouble, they come up as a mob and they start attacking, and sometimes government will silently support them. Sometimes, uh, you know, government will try to protect them. Sometimes these arrests happening just for saving these people from the mob. Many times we misunderstand. We think that some Christians were arrested in this particular place. We will think that is something government is doing against Christians. Many times it is not the case. They are trying to arrest and take the person so that they can be saved from the hands of these people, agitated people coming with a lot of bitterness, and they want to attack this Christian, for example. But we know in some nations, the government itself is against, Christianity. All right. I do not wish to talk a lot more about this subject because this being a recorded session, I'm a bit careful with my words. Okay, now let me continue with religious threat. So I think now you got a good picture about the political threat. We can continue with religious threat. The first threat was coming from Judaism. I will try to explain briefly because we do not have so much of information about this. Briefly, I will explain what are some of the religious challenges came from Judaism. The first kind of threat is called elogai. Elogai was a kind of a movement or a group, we can say. It's a heretic group. They had problem with the word logos in John's gospel. You know, the opening words of John's gospel goes like this. It says, in the beginning was the word, that means logos, and the logos was with God, and the logos was God. So this people coming with a greater Jewish background, I think it started at Antioch. Okay, Antioch was a Jewish center. Okay, because once Jerusalem was attacked, majority of the Jews, they moved to the nearest city, which is Antioch. Antioch was around some 250 kilometers around from Jerusalem. So they moved to Antioch and they settled down. And you know, Christianity started its its growth from Antioch. From Antioch, they started sending missionaries, etc. You know that. So in Antioch church, many people were coming from this Jewish background, and they had an opinion against those days Hellenistic understanding of God. This word logos is something related to the Gnostic idea that we will discuss a little later. You know, we will talk about how the pagan culture has attacked Christianity. So we will discuss a little later. So some of these Jewish background Christians, the Judaizers, they had a problem. They made a sect, a separate group who were against John's gospel and his revelation, all his writings. They said that John's gospel and his epistles and his revelation, that all promotes Gnosticism to Christianity. Okay, and they were totally opposed to that. So this movement started, a Logai movement. Logos, a logos, you know, basically you can understand that way. A, whenever you put before a word, it is opposing to that. That's the meaning. A logai means against logos, kind of movement. Okay, this much only you need to understand. We do not have a lot of information, but some of the early church fathers, they wrote against it. That's how we know about this. But this influenced and resulted in another heresy called Ebionism. So let me talk about that. Ebionism. We do not know who actually started this movement. Some say that a person whose name is Ebion, he started, and his followers were Ebionites. So this philosophy is called Ebionism. So this is something related to how they view Jesus Christ. It is a false view on the nature of Jesus Christ. They basically denied Jesus' divinity. They believed that Jesus was Son of God. He is adopted by God, an early form of adoptionism. So according to this particular belief system, Jesus, he is a gifted man, a descendant of David, but nothing more than that. He was just a human. So they rejected most of the Paul's epistles and they accepted only Matthew's gospel, but not fully. They said that Matthew's gospel contains some truth about Jesus. And they also that it is important the Jewish laws. So we do not exactly know when it started. As I said, who originated it? We do not have clear writings. But mostly it started in the early days of the church. Irenaeus, in the 2nd century, he writes about this particular heresy. He writes against Ebionism. And Justin Martyr, Hippolytus, and Tertullian, these people, they also have some mention about Ebionism, and they writes against this movement. So they are basically the followers of Jesus we see in the scriptures. They were creating some problem. That's the reason in Galatians was spending a lot of time dealing with why we are not under the law. That topic he handled primarily to address some of these issues created by Judaizers. And these Ebionites, they were maybe the next generation of Judaizers. And as I said, Al-Logai movement that started after John released his writings. Okay, John's writings happened somewhere in the end of 1st century. Okay? After from 90 AD to maybe 96 AD, roughly we can say that's the time period in which John wrote his Gospels, his epistles, and his revelation. So after his writings, this Elogai movement started, and after a while, these Ebionites they started, coming up with their problems, and Judaizers were, we can consider them as their ancestors in this. What these people did is they made their own gospel. They basically revised the Gospel of Matthew, and they called their new gospel as the Gospel according to the Hebrews. So in this particular gospel, they are presenting Jesus as a mere human being. Okay, so Jesus is portrayed as two parts in the life of Jesus: before baptism and after baptism. So according to these people, after baptism, what happened is, we read, in Matthew's gospel, a voice came from heaven and a bright light came from heaven. Okay. In Matthew chapter 3, the last few verses, we read, after being baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove and lighting on him. And behold, a voice out of the heavens said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So they slightly modified that account from Matthew's Gospel, and they said, "This day I have begotten thee." So this is what was heard from heaven. So according to Ebionite, Jesus was adopted as a son. I mean, this day I have begotten thee. From that, what they mean is, at the time of baptism, God the Father adopted Jesus as his son. So Jesus is a mere human being, miraculously born. He was a mere human being, and he was adopted son by God. In that sense, he is the Son of God. So Jesus became Christ. That means he was not Christ before. He became Christ at his baptism. So he reigned as a man, not God, throughout his entire ministry, and he died as a man. So Ebionites, Tertullian writes about them. He says Ebionites, they considered Jesus as a wise and gifted person and nothing more than that. So you can understand why this movement is called as a threat from, you know, the religion, especially the Jewish background. So now it's going to be 8 o'clock, so I would like to stop here. Next week, we will continue with a philosophical threat coming from the pagan. We are going to talk about some of the philosophical changes Christianity had to face in the first century. Thank you very much. Let me stop here and we will meet again next week to continue our study.